Hello you, welcome to Geekism and welcome to a very special Planet Coaster 2 video. I got to play the game. Thank you so much to Frontier, first of all, for letting me have this hands-on with the game. We'll be diving into all of it, but before we do, I just want to remind you that this is an early access version of the game. I had about an hour and 30 minutes with it total. I was using a remote play setup and was figuring everything out as I went along. And because my time was so limited with the game, I didn't really think it was worth trying to actually build anything that's like looks good or anything. I just wanted to try and see as much as possible. So this video is mostly just me putting crap down. If you're new to the channel and want to see some nice Planet Coaster builds, you can check out stuff I've done in the first game, or obviously subscribe so that you can see lots of Planet Coaster 2 content once it comes along. But this video is very much me being a kid at Christmas and tearing the wrapping paper off everything within 15 seconds. The demo started with a look at the career mode. So this was partway through the narrative. I think they said it was chapter 3, and you'll see here that it is fully voice acted with a narrative very similar to the Planet Zoo career mode. And some of the things you had to do could only be on one side of the park, and some of them were a bit more free reign on the other side of the park. One thing they did tell me though was that I can either have 45 minutes in here, or as soon as I got my bronze medal, I could go straight over to Sandbox. So I just very quickly got the bronze medal. I did spend a moment taking a look through some of the menus, so you can go ahead and pause these and have a better look at them if you wish to. This is a lot of the park options, the settings, the rating, your staff info, guest info. Obviously, a lot of this stuff isn't sort of populated here because the park's just open and there's nothing in it, but it gives you a good idea of what this sort of stuff looks like. Seemingly, not only does it give you numbers here, such as park prestige, it actually goes a little bit into detail as to what they mean and how you improve them, which I think is a really good addition. And we can also see the research tree that looks like it unlocks things in chunks. So you'll get a selection of chain lift coasters and then a selection of launch coasters and what have you. The same with the track rides and the transport and flat rides. Few things of note here, I think, is that the ride list just seems really, really fleshed out. The transport list has both steamboats and cable cars, which all came as later additions into Planet Coaster 1, and the flat rides and the coasters we'll take a look at later once we move into Sandbox Mode. There's a lot of them, a real good number of them. So to be allowed into Sandbox Mode, I had to place down a pool and 2 flumes and have a park rating of 1, and it all had to happen onto Kenta's side of the map. That was part of the narrative, that there was 2 sort of competing owners, and we had to do stuff on one side of the map. So I honestly just used blueprints to kind of make this happen as quick as I could, so that I could go into the sandbox menus and have a look at some more of the available options for the sort of stuff that we're interested in, right? Or the sort of stuff I'm interested in. I assume you are if you're watching me. But for the most part, in this mode, it all seemed to work pretty well. I placed down a pool here that had a slide in it. The slide wasn't enough to count as one of the 2 I had to build because they had to have a certain excitement rating. So we'll place down more flumes in a moment, but we also needed changing rooms and then the service purchase building, which is called the guest services shop, and that's the one that sells the passes to use the pools. You'll see here I'm also putting down a few of the mythology blueprints, and this all looks awesome. We have a little better look at the scenery later on, of course, but you'll see here it's got a very sort of Hercules kind of vibe going on, and I really dig it. Obviously it looks very clearly mythology, but there's a lot, as you can see, very useful pieces in there. A nice marble wall, some nice stone pieces, some relatively generic pieces, even though they're still sort of got that mythology vibe. You can definitely see a different uses for them. Those braziers there could very well work in a more of an Arabic kind of setting, and absolutely fine. So really great to see that the scenery obviously comes from a single theme, but within that theme you can still sort of break it down into multiple things, and that's really exciting. So we have to open up the guest services shop here, and that does require power. So we have our first look at putting down power. Having spoke to a few people who were also in at this demo, they seem to struggle a little bit with this one. Luckily, I just kind of either figured it out or fell upon it. You need 2 things to make the power work. You need the thing that generates the power, and then the thing that distributes the power. So here is the solar panel going down to generate the power, and you'll see here it's straight making 80, but I notice it doesn't actually seem to be lighting anything up. But there are distributors, and these are the things that you're going to have spread around your park, and then you link them up and bingo bango, we now have a distributor that's giving power. As you can see there, it's quite a large area, so you're not going to have to spam these all over the place, and so you can have an area off to one side of the park that generates the power, a solar field, or even just some generators, and then the wiring can run through the park, and you just have those generators sporadically through your backstages, or I imagine if you're a sandbox player, you can most likely just turn the feature off. So once I placed down a couple of slides that ticked the box for the bronze, the last thing I had to do was increase the park rating to 1, and it was something like 0.8. So I felt like it was pretty easy to bump that up by placing down a flat ride. I thought it would give us a good look at some of the flat rides in the game. As you can see, there are a lot of returning favorites, but all of them do seem to have been redesigned with that sort of generic style in mind, so that we can change them up with our own scenery. A lot of big stuff here still, unfortunately, you know, these star wheels and star watchers and sun flares and what have you, but still a lot of decent sized stuff as well. Just those pads are pretty big on a lot of them, but then I spotted the upswing here. The pirate ship got a slightly more Viking look to it than the pirate ship from the first game, but I will say much more of a generic look to it, which I think is absolutely perfect. It's a little smaller. The pad itself is still really big, and the whole thing is lifted off with stairs up to it. These things are a lot of flat rides. They're built into the ground. I can only assume it's a technical limitation with the way that the pad of the ride works. It sort of has to be on the ground level. There's maybe stuff you can do here with paths to make it look like it's underground, but yeah, it still has that sort of slightly high raise, but all of the colors there are editable, so you could even get rid of those waves, I think, with the color options. All I had to do here was get the thing open and get it powered, so you can test it. You'll see there it's working, it's sort of going round, but to actually get it open as far as the game is concerned, you need to get power to it, and you'll see here the generator just gets rung all the way back to that solar plant. You can't link from another thing, you can link from the solar plant there. That opens up, and as you can see there, the narrative kicks back in and shows me that I completed my bronze medal. How proud of me are you? I managed to do that in about 5 minutes. Not that I wanted to rush through. I'm not really a scenario player. We're Sandbox here, let's be honest. We like to spend way too long making pretty things. And as soon as they told me that as soon as you get your bronze medal, you're allowed to go into Sandbox, then I considered it a race. Okay, Sandbox Mode then, and we're in a Tiger build. There were 4, I think, to choose from as we went into this one. I wasn't allowed to choose this one. This was the one I was shown. And the first thing I did was went to track rides, and there's none in the game, currently, at least. In this build, they didn't want to show them. Again, I still think they're building up to a good sort of deep dive into them, how they all work with animatronics and what have you. So instead, I thought we'd take a look at the coasters. Now, I am not a coaster head. I enjoy riding them. I know a little bit about manufacturers and whatever. I will point out to people who don't know any better at theme parks, manufacturers if I know them. But as far as people go playing this game, this is not my area. But I knew that you would want to see all of these, so I do take a moment to just click through every single one. There is about 50 in the game. It's crazy. There are lots of different choices, different options, different styles, different manufacturers. There are a lot of stuff that came in DLCs for the first game that are now just in the base game. I know for a fact there is the swinging mine coaster that came with Adventure Pack. A lot of the others sort of blend into one, but there's a ton here, like an absolute ton, to the point where I'm not too sure what DLCs are going to look like in Planet Coaster 2, because it's just all here. I'm sure there's ones that are missing that can still be added, but yeah, there's a real load of stuff here, and obviously a lot of these will have the switch tracks, drop track features as well. At the very end of my demo, I did spend 5 minutes trying to build something with a switch track and just couldn't get my head around it, but I was super rushed. I had like 2 minutes left of the demo. There was literally a counter counting down. I will show you the footage later on, but honestly, I'm hoping somebody else who's a little bit more coaster-minded, I'm thinking maybe Corvus or Nerdchacho or one of the other guys who were in this look over, will be able to show you that sort of stuff a little bit better, but unfortunately, it just ain't me. But I do go through and show all of these off. Like I say, you can pause them all if you wish to, see what there is. There's the 2-seater inverters there, there's the 4-seater inverter, there's the flying one, and then there's a regular wooden like a classic Woody, then there's like a GCI Woody, and then there's the 2 types of RMC. Like, I know those. See, that's where my level stops. Like, that's all I've got. There's a big wide dive coaster. There's that, and then there's that thing with where they spin around on the edge. I don't know. This thing looks crazy. It's a log flume on a rail. Never seen one of those before. Looks insane. And then there's the splash coaster and the water coaster. And I don't think any of the DLC, the Deluxe Edition ones are in this build. There's obviously another 10 or so rides there between Deluxe and pre-order. Wild Mouse. There's that spinning one that I mentioned before, and then that's the X Dimension with the swinging chairs. That thing's insane. Okay, next up, taking a look at some of the scenery, and I started off with one of the sets of the plants. Originally going into this, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to put every piece of scenery down, and then I realized that there was actually thousands, and that would most likely be all of my time. So I just kind of wanted to show you the options here. So there are 5 plants there, and obviously all of these are scalable as well, and a lot of the ones with flowers on are recolorable. And yeah, there's a lot in here. There's a lot of planters, which is fantastic to see. There's planter sets, there's more generic ones, and you can see here, look, the Viking ones and stuff. They're just very nice plain wooden ones. They're not necessarily, you know, sat there with Viking horns and dragons all over them. So just super useful stuff. A lot of stuff carrying over from the original Planet Coaster and Planet Zoo as well. I definitely, when I take a look at some fences in a moment, you'll see a lot of stuff. I placed down a sunflower, and that instantly made me think, oh, sun, and I just couldn't figure out how to change the lighting. Apparently you could. I couldn't figure it out. But lovely lilies with roots going down into them. I then took a look at the rocks. Again, all that you would expect here. A set of rocks for each of the biomes. And yes, that one's pretty huge. It is called Boulder, and I think there is another set called Rock that just starts off smaller. I wanted to kind of get it in here so you could see it against Peeps. But here you'll see that's a big old rock. You can go into it. It just takes me a minute to figure out where buttons are, so bear with me. But you'll see here that we're going to scale it. There are key bindings for all of these buttons, of course, but it took me a little while to figure them out. You can go right down there, and then for some reason on the rocks you can go up to 500%. I don't know if that's purposeful or if that's just a number they haven't capped yet. The scaling doesn't work like that on every item. The animatronics aren't scalable, and all of the items that are scalable actually have different variables, so they don't all go from 50 up to 500%. It seems like the rocks do. The next thing I wanted to try it with was a tree. You see this has like a highlight over it, but once that goes away, it's actually really nicely colored. You'll see here with the advanced move, I wanted to just go straight in. We can go down to 50% on the tree, up to like 200, I think, which I think is perfectly acceptable on trees. Just the fact that you can do this and go like 96% and then pull it away, put it down again, and, you know, give it a slight rotate. I figure out in a moment that I can move. I'm just looking at the menu here. There you go. Good job, John T. So here all I wanted to do was show you what a very slight scale and a rotation just looks like, and that's how you're going to place down trees. Let's be honest. They're all going to be very slightly different. Oh, how good is that, not to have the same tree repeating? It looks like a different model. It's so good. Honestly, the one thing I want to take away from all of this is the scaling. It's an absolute game changer. Just an absolute game changer. The amount of variation it provides is just insane. Anyway, something that doesn't scale is animatronics. There's only a handful of animatronics in the game currently. I still think there's a lot coming, and they're waiting for the dark ride or at least the track ride release. And the animatronics in the game currently are kind of Planet Coaster animatronics. They're kind of wacky, but I don't hate them. One thing I will say is they're all a lot better scaled, even though you can't scale them. They're not Kraken scale, even the sort of big ones. I mean, this, for instance, yes, it's clearly Viking-y, but I don't hate that. I actually feel like that could work on like a featured restaurant or something. And then there's these things that are a little bit more sort of generic. One thing I couldn't find were the seemingly empty things that we can attach scenery to. They may not well have been in this build, but we have seen them in menus. And then there were the singing eels. I've got to give you a listen to these. They have their own song, and it is amazing. How good's that? I like so specific, most likely never get used. But I don't care. Planet Coaster, you give me some nice generic pipes and wooden planks to keep me happy. You can keep doing stuff like this as well. That made me think about the new characters, so I thought I'd have a look at those. And there are a few new ones here that we're seeing from the mythological and the Viking setting. Interestingly, the Viking image is a male Viking with a big beard, but when I placed it down, it's a lady Viking, and I actually mentioned that to the developers. I was like, "Is this a work in progress, or is it was going to be a guy, now it's a girl?" And they said, "No, it's actually random. In the same way that when you hire a mechanic, it might be male or female. If the character has their face shows, you might get a male or a female one." So that's neat, I think. It would be nice to be able to pick rather than it be random, because if you really want the guy with the beard or really want the woman and you're only getting the other ones, you might have to hire a few and fire them until you get the right one, I guess. But even still, the fact that it's a guy and a girl, I mean, that kind of gives you two characters, really. They can both now be set up on a stage and they can, do a little show together or what have you, but they look great anyway. I think they're really cool. And then a lot of the repeating ones from the first game are in there as well. Okay, next up I want to take a look at the wall sets in the game. So the best way to do this would be to just place down the 4-meter wall of every wall set, just to have a little look at the texture. So first of all, there was this corrugated wall, and I'm pretty sure all of these are colorable. I don't spend time going and changing each one, but for the most part, I'm pretty sure these are all colorable. So the first one is a corrugated wall, and then there's another metal panel wall. There is this bamboo wall, which is kind of neat. There's a lot of really generic stuff in here, so there's no need to panic. We just have a nice sort of breeze block wall there, which is very, very useful. There is a classic brick, and I did just want to see what this one looked like colorable, and it looks fine. Like, I pick a really gross, garish color just to see what happens, and that sage looks lovely, and then that Russian blue looks terrible because you can't actually change the grout on it, so it's just the brick color. But still, the fact that you can have different variations of browns and reds and greys and stuff on those brick, I think that's great. Sort of two-tone panel wall. The next one was one of the big marble ones from the mythology set, but there is a nice plain marble as well, which I think is lovely, especially if they have that as a floor. I just did walls for this, unfortunately. They have the modern wall that we had from the original Planco game that I think in moderation is very usable, and then just an absolute plain panel wall, they call it. There is a bamboo, this plaster wall as well, which is fantastic, very useful. Probably one of the ones we use the most. Actually go into the manual color here and just have a little mess around and give it like very pale green. It's very subtle, but that's cool. They call this resort wall trim. It looks pretty neat. And then we move into a few others. There is this stone. Again, very, very useful. They have it here with all the big gables on it and stuff, but I'm pretty sure it's available as just a plain stone as well. Yep, there it is. Super nice. It's called Ruin. I imagine it's from mythology, but I think that's very, very useful. Rough stone, and then it goes as far as having an actual sort of, built rock wall as well, which I think is great. There's a wooden texture there that's pretty nice as well, more of a rough wood. And then here's one of the Viking pieces. At this point, I wanted to see how the snapping works. Snapping is adjusted so you can raise it up and down on a wall, which is kind of neat, rather than it just sticking to the middle. But after that, I give up and carry on putting down the walls. Again, I was on the clock here, folks. I was just trying to get as much on show as I could. But I think it gives you a really good example of there you go. And there's another wooden texture as well. So like 3 different wood walls, 3 different stone walls, that nice marble, that nice brick. I'm really happy with that as a basic wall set. I think that's more than enough to get started with. All right, let's take a look at scaling. Here is a couple of plain pillars. Really great to see. Very similar to Planet Zoo. Super useful. They have flat ones, they have round ones, they have square ones. They're all different. They come in 4 meter and 2 meter and 1 meter, and then all of them in themselves are scalable right down to that. Now, bear in mind, this is the 4 meter one I'm scaling here. There are smaller, right up to that huge thing. Oh my goodness. Honestly, a lot of the stuff in this is fantastic. The new pathing is a little fiddly to get used to, but once you do, I think it's going to be incredible. All of the new rides, all the new scenery looks great. Scaling is the big one. In my opinion, scaling is huge. Or small. Haha, see what I did? Click the like button. That's the sort of thing you click the like button for. Okay, at this point I wanted to put down some scenery with a scale of reference. So here we have one of our entertainers. I think she's maybe a little taller than a regular guest, but still, I wanted to give you an idea. So here's one of the mythology column pieces, and I just wanted to show you how small we can go with it and how big we can go with it. I'm starting to figure out the controls here. Look, it's just added into the rotation and movement. Oh boy, how cool is that? I honestly, I'm going to get a bit funny about it, but it's insane. And here I'm just looking at a few random pieces, some nice rope there. Even these decorative columns, yes, it's Viking, but I think that could go for Tiki or a lot of different things, to be honest with you. One thing I couldn't find was just like a nice like plain wooden plank. I do find that in a moment. I realize that I'm in pillars, but there's a nice plain concrete pillar. And then there's that plain pillar is the one we put down before. I mean, this is all just great. This is exactly what you want to see. All I'm looking for here is a plain piece of wood, and then I find it, so don't panic. Here we go. I tasked myself with the idea of trying to find what the smallest piece was. So here is a 2 meter plank. I think there was even a 1 meter plank. Do I go and find it? I do. Look at me. It's been a while since this was actually played. So here we go. 1 meter plank. And then we can see what that looks like scaled down. I mean, it's basically the size of a magic wand. I think that is perfect. Oh boy, we're going to be able to do some really awesome custom stuff with this. And look how happy she is, look, swinging her Mjolnir around. Now, I'm hoping I can adjust this once the game is out with key bindings, but currently angle snap isn't spacebar, which it is in Planet Coaster 1. Spacebar is actually pause. So you'll see whilst I'm placing stuff down, I pause and unpause the game a lot because I'm desperately trying to angle snap. Here I've just put it onto a 45-degree angle, and we're taking a look at a couple of the doors. Again, like this one is actually called Big. I wish I'd have spent a bit more time on these, because looking at the menu now, I'm seeing like moving doors and all sorts of stuff, which seem really fun. But here, I wanted to just give you one more look at scaling. I was so excited about scaling. Just to show you how different you can make two things look. So here's a beautiful vase or vase going down. They slapped his face on them. And here you can see, just with a couple of clicks to make different colors and different scaling. I mean, that in the original game, that would have been 2 different items, just a small and large. And the fact that we can now scale it, I think it's awesome. Here is a door. I was worried that maybe doors might not be scalable just because they're meant to be the size of people. And but no, even those you can scale right down or again right up to like 300 or something. Like again, the scaling goes changes a little bit on each build, whether you go big or small. I genuinely think with scaling and being able to recolor stuff, we might have a really good crack at force perspective kind of things. You'll be able to sort of take the color out and shrink stuff down as it gets bigger and as it gets further and further away, or it's meant to look further and further away. It's very exciting. Here I'm trying to figure out how to group items, because obviously being able to group items and work off the x-axis of already placed down items is really quite important. Fortunately, it's a little difficult to do with the build as it currently is. The main reason being is that the menu goes away when you're editing an item. So here we can find a multi-select and we select them all. It also tries to select path pieces. So instead we can go in and manually sort of click them one by one, and that seems to work. And from there we can click confirm to say that those are the 3 things we want to work with. And then in that scenery we can then group them. As you can see, we can also recolor them whilst they're in a group, which is very useful as long as they all sort of have similar things. And then once you're in that group, you can go into it and edit them individually, or as a group you can scale them and that works, which kind of blows my mind because they scale together. Now it does get a little funky at each end of the extremes there, especially if something in there has a different amount of higher scaling. So you'll see in a moment, that was the next thing I wanted to try. I was doing like Sherlock stuff for you here, folks. I could have just been playing the game. I could have just been having fun, enjoying myself, but like, no, I was like, I'm going to see if I can break this. So here, I wanted to try and make something super small, and then come out of that group and then make the group smaller and see if you can trick the game into making stuff even smaller than it's meant to. You can't. They've already clocked on and fixed that. So instead what happens is everything shrinks down to the smallest it can do, and once it all scales together it works perfectly, but once those smaller items go past the smallest, it stays and still moves. Like, it's a very elegant solution for what could have just been a no, you can't do that, everything has to be scaled individually. So I actually think it's quite a good way of doing it. And again, if you're building something and then dragging it up huge, like, you're kind of doing it wrong. It's really good for making something as a building 10% smaller than it was, or 15% smaller than it was, or whatever. And all of those wall pieces, even the ones off the grid, I'm not sure whether they scale. I didn't try that. I wish I had done. But here I just wanted to confirm that as a group you could recolor stuff, because a lot of these things we perhaps take for granted now, but they weren't in the base game of Planet Coaster 1, and I just wanted to make sure that a lot of this stuff hadn't sort of stepped back a little bit. And you can actually recolor things as a group, which is awesome. So you can select a whole roof and recolor it all in one go. Perfect. The only thing I wasn't able to do that I want to do and can do in Planet Coaster is have an item selected, then go into the advanced move of that item, and then pick a different item and have that different item be at the same advanced move point as the first item. For instance, if I have a column down and I go advanced move and change it to a statue, I know the statue sits in the middle of the column and I can lift it up. Or if I'm doing a spire, or a lot of things really. I think it's one of those things that it's probably difficult for me to explain, but if you can think what I'm talking about, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Just being able to have that advanced move feature open while I choose another item. And currently, if you're ever building with an item, the menu steps away. I don't know if that's because I'm working on a more console focused build, or if the game itself has become a little bit more console focused with it coming out at launch. I'm hoping that's something that can be worked on. It is something I'm going to pop into an email to Frontier, because it's a big thing personally. Okay, next up, I took a look at some of the special effects, and these all look great. We're going to kind of whiz through these pretty swiftly, but there's dirt blowing, there's raining, there's snow, there's smoke and fire and some electrical sparks, everything you would expect, everything we've got in previous games, but they just look a little bit nicer. The graphics are a little bit better on them. The items, the little sort of emitter there is much smaller and less intrusive. I think it's all really good stuff. Next up, I wanted to take a look at some of the topiary options. There's a awesome king coaster there, you can see, and a few different shaped bushes. These all look a lot better than Planet Coaster 1. They're a little less manicured, which I think is good. And there's also the options to seemingly build your own there using some of the sticks. And there's now a whole range of hedges as well in different shapes and sizes, and not only that, all of these are scalable. So here's where I'm just trying to figure out how would I go in and change there. That's what I want to do. Now I want to pick a different piece whilst that menu is open, and unfortunately at the moment I seemingly can't. So that would be something I really want to see, because I want to be able to pick a different type of hedge there but still have it lined up. It's frustrating. It'd be really good to have that as an option. Okay, at this point I very quickly threw down a flat ride. Please do not look at it. The paths are going to be incredible. I'm going to need a couple of hours to figure them out though. But we eventually we get a ride in. I was trying to mess with path height over there. It doesn't seem like it's completely fleshed out in the game right now, but I just wanted to get a ride open because I wanted to get people into the park, because I wanted to take a look at collision. I wanted to see whether scenery caused collision or whether it didn't, and it doesn't. Which is interesting. I don't know which I would rather, to be honest. Perhaps I would rather that it doesn't, because I like the idea of using scenery to still generate sort of interesting path decals. But yeah, as it stands, the guests completely ignore scenery. Interestingly, there are curb pieces and barrier pieces in the game, like we had in Planet Coaster 1, that did act as collision for the guests that don't currently. Now, whether that's something that they're going to add or if it's just something they've decided they don't want, actually guests just walk through all the scenery. They're stopping here because they're looking at an entertainer, not because of anything to do with the hedges. It's less of an issue now that paths are so adjustable that you can just, if you wanted to, just cut a bit of the path out and have the thing, there. But there is something to be said about just having a lamppost and having them walk around it. It'd be nice to see if they still did that. Here you'll see me looking at a few different... This one is literally called like a no entry fence barrier. I think I searched for no entry and found this. Great piece, by the way. I'm very happy this is in the game, and I think as long as we can recolor this to just be silver, it'd be great. But there's a couple of different barrier entry signs there, and I think I had a look at finding that one fence piece as well, because I remember seeing them. Lots of fences here. Some of them you'll recognise from Planet Coaster 1, some of them you'll recognise from Planet Zoo. But here you go. We have these sort of the ribbon fences here, the stanchions, and but unfortunately, the guests just wander through them. So it'd be interesting to see how that develops, whether or not that becomes something we can still do, or whether we are just going to have to rely on the customizability of paths to be the way that we stop guests going in certain areas. There are staff pathing as well. Great chain link fence. Really love to see it. Again, I think I was putting down some of these just to see if they had to sort of recalculate their pathing, and that's what stopped them not going through it. But no, they just go through it. It's not an issue for them. Seeing as it's the big new thing, I thought it's only right to put down a water slide, and there's a few new options here. So we have body flume, that's the sort of regular rounded flumes. There's then slide, which is a bit flatter, and there is a wide version of that one as well. There is a double seater flume, and then there's a single seater flume with the inner tube. There's then one for a mat and one for a larger raft that seats a group. So lots of nice options there, to be honest with you. I decided to try and build just a body slide. You often see these as like racing things where there's like 5 or 6 of them all identical and they just sit alongside each other and go down, and I thought it'd be kind of neat to try and build one of those. We've seen it in the key art of the game, but never since. Interestingly, it doesn't seem to be a way of duplicating a slide once it's built. The way you would want to do this, of course, is to build one and then just duplicate it 5 or 6 times along the front there. I couldn't see a way of doing that. It may be a thing that I've just not found, or it may be a feature that's coming, or it may just be something we're not able to do. Again, using snap and making a note of the lengths here, you could very quickly just rebuild this 5 or 6 times. It's not the end of the world, especially if you're in a sandbox mode where you really want it to look just right. You don't really mind doing this kind of work. But I just thought I'd place it down here and have a little fun. Make it a bit wobbly. It doesn't seem like it's possible to fling them off the edge of it. Not that that's something I want to do, but I hear a lot of people for some reason want to kill pretend computer people, which is strange. Having a little bit of an issue going back into rebuilding stuff. I found it on both the slides and the coasters. It didn't seem very, like, there was an edit mode and a construction mode, and I don't really understand what the difference was. So yeah, it's interesting. But eventually we get there and we make this nice big slide, and then we have a long runoff. I assumed with this one it would be a runoff that just goes and they stop and they get out where they end, because sometimes they'll go a bit further. But no, seemingly only had the option for a flume end going into the water. Maybe the matte versions doesn't have that, but it seems like I would like this to have a skim pool, and it doesn't at the moment. So so there we go, that's done. And then here I try and sort of copy over and paste it again, but it doesn't unfortunately seem to happen. There we see doing a great headstand there coming off. Makes me realize that we need a pool for this to go into. That's fine, we can have a little play with some of the pool customizability. Pool tools then. We start by placing down a line pool tool, and then in another menu that I can't you'll probably see in a moment, it's automatically putting in the lazy river jets. So this isn't I'm not building a lazy river here. I'm pretty sure if I wanted to, I could go in and delete the jets, or you don't have to place them. But here I just thought, well, I want to build a lazy river, so let's have them automatically in. So the idea was to build a lazy river that then either end just comes down to a larger pool area, so we can have somewhere for those slides to go. And it seemingly all works pretty well. This sort of adds pathing on if you wanted to. At the moment I'm in infinity mode, so you don't actually see the paths go on. But it seemingly all just works really good, to be honest with you. There's definitely some learning curve here just to make sure you're using the right buttons. I mean, this shape is a bit ridiculous, but then you can go in and sort of smooth it. Or you can go in and literally pick individual nodes of the edge and move them around. It's just going to take a little bit of getting used to. It's not bad. It's just not the most intuitive, just because of how many options they've given us, if that makes sense. My biggest worry with this, honestly, is that a new player comes to the game and is a little bit overwhelmed with this as a feature. Here, I'm just trying to put down some plaza path to join up the what will be the lazy river entrance and the pool area. And I'm thinking here that this path will go under the water, and or ignore the water, and it doesn't. I think there is an option to do that. I think there's like a priority option there that I didn't toggle, which I should have done. And I'm pretty sure if I'd have clicked priority there, it wouldn't have gone over the water. But it is what it is. Instead, we just sort of go back and place it in. I'm definitely trying to use the draw tool, because I think once it's up to speed, it's probably going to be the most useful one. But actually, honestly, a combination of draw tool and line tool and stamp tool and erasing, I just think we're going to have to kind of use all of them to get the paths how we want to. That's fine. But again, in a 45-minute-ish demo, I didn't have the time to like really go into the intricacies of it. I did figure out how to use the brush tool though to make it all look the same, and we end up with what I wanted to do, which is just have a bit of path in between the pool and the lazy river, and then I have a little mess around with the stamp tool here to try and sort of fill in the gaps. And like I say, I think actually a combination, just that's angle snap with the with the pausing. That's me desperately trying to make angle snap work. With a combination of the draw tool, the line tool, and the snap and the shape tool here, the stamp builder or what have you, you are going to be able to do what you want it to do. Like there you go, to fill that area in, and I could then even go into that node and smooth it, and it will all join up. And eventually, you're like definitely going to be able to do everything you want to do. It just takes a little bit of finessing. You'll see here I try and play around with the nodes. Again, just couldn't quite get it to do what I wanted to do. I end up selecting 2 nodes here and moving them both. But yeah, the concept's there. I just didn't want to waste my hour messing around with these. The smooth will even out nodes, much like a coaster it would, but doesn't get rid of those sort of jangly nodes there. You're going to have to go in with the stamp here, paint them out. But again, even in the couple of minutes here, I never felt like I was banging my head against a wall. I just felt like I was learning a new tool, so that's good. I then had a little mess around with the tuk-tuk pieces, because the game now does have the individual shop counters, so you don't necessarily need to have the boxes. You can just build the counters, and because of that, you can build them into these little tuk-tuk huts. The snap the snap to surface is a little funky at the moment. I couldn't quite figure that out. It ended up a little bit tricky to kind of snap things together, but you'll see we can add in a counter, and that snaps quite nicely to that actually, and you can drag it back and forth, and you know, like obviously this needs more work to raise it up a little bit, put some wheels underneath it or what have you, but that's great that there is an open counter now where you don't have to use those the big boxes. So currently here in Sandbox, you do still need power for this stuff. There may already be an option to turn it off. We weren't actually we were asked not to go into the settings menus because they were still very work in progress in this version of the build. But there we go, people can come up now and buy stuff. And you'll also notice here that there's a very light rain as well. It never really gets much worse than this. I never saw like a proper storm. There is a member, there's a guest there with an umbrella. I'm not selling umbrellas, so they've bought that with them, which I think is neat. And again, because with it being such a light rain, it didn't seem to bother them that much, although a few of them sort of go, oh, but for the most part, it didn't seem to fuss them that much. I then spent 5 minutes messing around with paths. Look at those smooth slopes. Oh, woo-wee! They're beautiful. Again, please take everything you see built here with a pinch of salt. I was on a very tight deadline and wanted to throw down as much as I could, and I was playing remotely. But yeah, just, you know, proof of concept, Sexy slopes. We love to see it. Okay, lastly then, a little bit of coaster stuff, but mostly just scenery stuff still. I apologize. If you're super into coasters, then I make them look nice, but I don't know enough about them to really show them off for you. I'm sorry. But here I wanted to see the options for scaling onto coasters. Was there any limitation with size, with distance? The answer's no. You put what you like on these things. Like, here's a huge, like a lamp that I scaled right up. This is a trash can. That obviously doesn't work because, you know, it doesn't work. It doesn't seem to be any changes with coaster stations currently, unfortunately. Here we can attach this to the animal. So here then, as long as I think that sort of, that ghost of the cart there is lit up, this is still connected to it. So we place this box, we move it right away using advanced move. We scale it up, and baby, that's attached to the coaster. As far as the game is concerned, in this version of the build, that's attached to the coaster. You can watch the thing run around the track. There he goes. So, I mean, you know, do with that information what you will. Seeing as that worked, I thought I might as well ride the thing. You know, this is a bit of a janky blueprint, but the camera personally seems a lot smoother than it has done in previous games. I think they did a really great job of that. Okay, the last thing I spent my time doing is trying my hardest to get the switch tracks to work. I was doing my due diligence for you all. I just couldn't figure it out. I'm hoping we get a video on it, or, you know, the track is showing you which way it goes there. It's showing you that it goes in. I couldn't figure out how to edit the other side of the switch track was the problem, and I can't imagine it's just a switch track onto those wheels and back again. I'm assuming you can carry on building from those wheels, but for the life of me, I just could not figure it out. And at this point, I had like a minute left of the game to play. So I just put down one of the big coaster blueprints and rode it. Thank you so much for watching. There will be a lot more coverage of Planet Coaster 2 on the channel in the very near future. So if you're not already, please don't forget to subscribe. As soon as I get my hands on it properly, I'll build something nice. This was very much just a reconnaissance mission. And I hope you appreciate the fact that I spent the time just throwing as much down as possible to keep us all in the loop. Love you all to bits. Until the next one, be good.